Hello. Our story begins in 25 BBY at the Jedi Temple. The Council was in yet another session, one discussing the events of the galaxy and the potential trajectory of the Republic. Palpatine was in his second term, and he was continuously gaining more support. The Jedi didn't have a real issue with Palpatine at the moment, but there were some changes in the galaxy that they could see. There were whispers of a movement to challenge the Republic, one that could be used to usurp the current power in the galaxy. The Order couldn't stand idly if that were to happen, but they decided, for once, to investigate why this might be the case. As Ki-Adi-Mundi referred to Dooku, he was a political idealist, one who had dreams of the perfect galaxy, one where the government and his people weren't flawed. The Council had their issues with former Master Dooku, but they never believed he'd be bold enough to lead a resistance against the Republic. Due to the Jedi investigating these whispers, two of their masters stood before them. Eeth Koth and Coleman Trebor were on diplomatic missions across the galaxy. They both were traveling separately, but their conclusive evidence was similar. Eeth went first, disclosing that there was indeed a separatist movement brewing in the Outer Rim. These politicians and people felt wronged by the Republic, reporting similar behavior listed in some of Master Dooku's reports from when he was once a Jedi. Due to Eeth being a long-standing member on the Council, he was well aware of these notions, reports, and missions from the former Jedi. Eeth continued and expressed that he noted that Dooku had garnered support from people to start a movement, though the Jedi Master was unsure of how far Dooku would be able to go without a backing military and/or government. The main point he came around to is there were a lot of people in the galaxy hurting, and it was because the Republic was corrupt. Sadly, many of these people saw the Jedi with the same lens. The Jedi were formerly the Knights of the Republic, and now they blindly served the government without any real understanding of the people suffering in the galaxy. Coleman Trebor's mission was very similar to Eeth's. While Master Koth investigated the rise of this movement in the Mid-Rim, Coleman was tasked with looking into the suffering in the galaxy. The Council had become aware of, in recent years, the decline in the quality of life of galactic citizens. Without the Nile ruling over the Outer Rim, it was controlled by gangsters and criminal syndicates. Coleman discovered that slavery was on the rise, but Republic funding wasn't going to where it said it was going. The purpose of Coleman's mission was to see if Palpatine and his allies were faithful to their campaign promises. Tragically, they weren't, and the people that voted them into office paid the price for it. He was supposed to be an upgrade over Valorum, but all that really happened was the perpetuation of corruption. Master Trebor commented on how people in the Mid-Rim and Outer Rim locations were looking for any alternatives. Despite Coleman and Eeth being in different locations and on separate missions, the people all said the same thing. It was time for change. If the Republic didn't change, then what was there for the people to do? They needed to rise up. There were more people than there were government officials. If it wasn't serving them, if it was not protecting them, then voices like Dooku would have validity. Political idealism would flourish under the blood moon of the Republic. Yoda proposed making a note of these problems to Palpatine, but it was clear the room had changed. The other Council members believed that while Yoda had a point or two, maybe Dooku was right. One of the remaining High Republic Masters on the Council, Oba Rencesis, was starting to see the writing on the wall. The Republic wasn't what it once was. Politicians squabbled over trivial issues, ones that affected a minority of their constituents. Of course, these being the big companies that funded their elections. How else could one stay in power if they don't spend their time in term funding credits into re-election? Oppo watched and saw the difference between leaders like Chancellor Lina So and politicians like Chancellor Palpatine. They may have been 200 years apart in ruling, but the ineffectiveness of this current era was daunting to say the least. Oppo knew it, and Yoda should see it too. Perhaps they were wrong to trust the Republic's intuition after the bombing of the Great Republic Fair. The senators of the time didn't reflect their chancellor when they cowered away. Maybe that was the beginning of the end for the Republic, and the Jedi just played into it. Oppo had a profound existential feeling when he thought of this, and he expressed these feelings and memories to the Council. Being that each member was well versed in Republic and Jedi history, they were able to follow along. Oppo's and Yoda's personal accounts of the events that transpired before and after the fall of Starlight Beacon would be used to show the absolute failure of the Republic. The Council did accept that they as an order did deserve some of the blame for the rise of corruption. However, they were an order of 10,000 or less members during the years between Chancellor So's last term and Palpatine's second. Their influence was important, but it would never overshadow that of the ruling government in the galaxy. Then from the other side of the room, Master Gallia spoke up and suggested that they have a conversation with Dooku, saying, "What's the worst that could come from it?" The Council, in the light of these new understandings, would do just that. Yoda would try and make some pleas to Palpatine to fix this system, and he'd be given more hollow promises. Inversely, Dooku was visited inside of his castle in Sereno. There was obviously something different about his aura, especially noticeable to his longtime friend Mace Windu, but it was left out of the conversation that ensued. The two former allies spoke about the Republic, the rumors of the Separatist movement, and the people of the galaxy. Dooku was well versed in all of these topics, and without blinking or stuttering, he laid out answers and told personable stories. Dooku hadn't yet started to make his planet suffer for his own desires. He was still very focused on his actual intentions, not the long-term goals of the Sith. Soon, his master would request him to be more deceitful to his people and to his own movement, and soon, his movement wouldn't be his, but for now, it was a pathway to righteousness. It was a trajectory that would positively change the galaxy, and for the Jedi present, they would see it as it was presented. The findings from Sereno would be brought back to Coruscant and would be presented by Mace Windu, Depa Billaba, and Plo Koon. The Council would listen to each of their informative spiels, and then come to Yoda, who would describe the promises made by Palpatine. At the end of both these discussions, it became readily clear that Dooku actually might be in the right. It was suggested by Master Rancisis that maybe the Jedi should look into relocating. Not a permanent move, but a change of scenery, one that would encourage the Jedi to not just act differently, but to think differently. If they were blind to so much, perhaps it was because of their ivory tower on Coruscant. Before he motioned it to a vote, he reminded them, if they were attached to this temple, then perhaps Dooku was indeed right about this order. Their attachment should not be to physical structures, as their only attachment should be to the Force. The Council would go on for day and night. This continued for weeks, but at the end of their time working through this, their evidence would be conclusive. It was time for the Jedi Order to make a change. Despite Dooku initially leaving the Order out of spite for their complacency, a small part of him wished to have the Jedi come to his side. He didn't initially care for the way of the Sith. He chose the path because Palpatine promised him a new future, one of which the price of freedom cost him everything he was. However, Sidious was concerned if the Jedi planned on changing their loyalty. If they did, he needed to prepare for this change. Dooku was in a weird bind. His determination to bring peace and order to the galaxy led to him killing his best friend Sidious. It pushed him to execute Master Yaddle after Qui-Gon's death, and 7 years later, the Jedi wanted to change their perspective. Was this what he wanted? Or would it be too late for the Jedi to right their wrongs? It was a tough decision, and an even tougher one remained the question of his loyalty to the Sith if the Jedi did join his movement. There have been numerous moments throughout his time as Palpatine's apprentice where he questioned his decisions, often in part to him wondering if Qui-Gon would have ever joined him. Most of the time, Dooku came to the conclusion that his apprentice would have never stood for this. Qui-Gon was a Jedi at heart. He would have never supported the killing of Sidious or the execution of Yaddle. Dooku also worried because he was always in question by his new teacher. His loyalty always needed to be proven. He often remembered how quickly Sidious moved on from Maul. Perhaps he was just as easily replaced. Dooku tried not to think on it too much. Instead, he told his master the truth about the Jedi and their move to find a new identity within themselves. Sidious gave his student new plans and preparations to ensure the Jedi Order was properly dealt with. If the clones couldn't be used for their original purpose, then the droid army would undergo similar preparations. Instead of Palpatine ending the war with the execution of Order 66, Dooku would off himself with the execution of Order 33. Sidious conceived a plot, one that would effectively wipe out his current student and allow Skywalker to fall into his hands. Order 33 would affect not just the Jedi, but Dooku too. The survivor of the fall become his new apprentice, and the Empire would rise. It would be perfect. With control over 2 galactic-sized armies, Sidious would have no issue making sure his victory came to fruition his way. The Jedi would spend a number of weeks making their move into the Outer Rim and Mid-Rim. There were an assortment of temples and outposts that could be utilized, but their mass exodus from Coruscant was done quietly. The Jedi had no intention of making the Republic aware of their decision. Their only motivation was giving this new way of life a try. Maybe they could find their element again. They might be on to who they once were, and they could reclaim the title of Knights. Who knew if they would be Knights of the Republic or Knights of the Galaxy, but they needed to come down to reality. The galaxy was changing, and it was not for the better. Many Jedi didn't understand why this was being done, but the Council made sure they provided ample reasons and debriefings for their Jedi too, not just to figure out why it was being done, but understand it in its entirety. The Order was confused about the entire shakeup, but every member cooperated. Due to the temple on Coruscant being the largest, the Order was diligently split up. Younglings and teachers would be sent to Tennu, where they can continue their learning, whereas knights and masters would be split up amongst temples and outposts at Tempest, Jeddah, and Deveron. The only downside to these various locations is that they had not been used in decades or centuries. They were abandoned for reasons, which led the Jedi to having to rebuild and update them. Many of the younger Jedi weren't happy with this, but the masters who were more understanding of why this move was commencing inspired their young brothers and sisters to see this challenge as a rite of passage. Additionally, the temple in Coruscant wasn't completely abandoned. Instead, the archivists called it their home. It was mostly quiet, aside from a couple other Jedi who frequented the halls. The council too was divided up amongst the 4 locations, 3 council members per new temple or outpost. But just because they were at these locations, it didn't mean they had permanence. The council was very adamant that they begin communicating with Dooku more so they could understand where to apply the most pressure to provide the most relief. This expansion and removal of the Jedi Order from Coruscant gave many Jedi the proper insight into what they were doing wrong. They were comfortable, and that more than anything was the real issue. It didn't mean that the Jedi couldn't take breaks or relax, but the issue more than anything was the fact that they refused to act. Like the Republic, they became content with the situation because it favored them. As the Jedi of old like Avar Kriss, Elzar Mann, Stellan Gios, Vernestra Raw, and Loden Greatstorm passed into the Force, their replacements found comfort in what little they needed to do. Sure, there was still life-endangering missions, but a majority of the Jedi reflected the motions of their Grand Master. The Nihil vanished, so there was no reason to fight. The Sith were gone for a millennium, so there was no need to worry. What followed were younglings bred into similar mindsets, ones that did not require the Jedi to break free from their comfort zone, a mindset that mimicked what the Republic was, and allowed citizens to suffer under the guise of a functional government. Now the Jedi were able to be personable with the people of the galaxy. They were able to see what their complacency caused, and especially with the Order on Jeddah, they realized how badly the galaxy needed resolution. Quickly, the Jedi saw Dooku's mindset not as radical, but as necessary. He desperately tried to get them to see it, and now they could, not from reports and not from the news, but with their own eyes. It encouraged them to act and be what they were meant to be. As the Jedi were acclimating to their new lifestyle in the Mid and Outer Rim, the Sith were concocting the next step in their plan. Initially, the Jedi were meant to accidentally find themselves into the war, and they were supposed to eventually find Kamino somehow. Now, without the Jedi on Coruscant or sitting in their tower, Palpatine needed to find a way to get the Jedi invested into the war, so he prepared what would be the perfect way to draw them in. However, this meant that the Clone Wars wouldn't begin on time. Palpatine initially needed 3 years, now he planned on 5 more. He was going to make the Republic look like oppressors, and when they showed that they had a new military force, the Jedi would stand against it in the name of righteousness. The clones would be used as martial law enforcement officers, but first, Dooku needed rowdy citizens. He needed to give the Republic a reason to crack down on its population, which would be provided. The plan would simply push the Jedi to view the Republic for what it really was. The only thing Dooku was curious about was how Palpatine planned on taking control over the Republic once he did that. There were 2 reasons Dooku wanted to know. Firstly, he was curious because how could Palpatine legitimately keep the population under his control after suppressing its citizens? Secondly, Dooku was curious because if things became unfavorable to him, then he needed to know how he could properly appeal to the galaxy. The next 4 years would see the rise in popularity from the Jedi in the Mid and Outer Rim, and a decrease in their popularity within the core. The Council started to become favorable of the Separatist movement, but they were strongly against acts of war. They were supportive of protesting movements made by citizens and often sent a couple dozen knights or masters to oversee these protests and make sure no acts of violence were committed. Then, the clones came. They were introduced in a bill backed by Palpatine and supported by Jar Jar. Similarly, Padme would have assassination attempts and be taken care of by Republic officers. giving Jar Jar the chance to back Palpatine openly. With clones being sent in to stop these rebellious protests, as Palpatine referred to them as, the people became more aggravated. On the planet Andon, tensions continued to grow, so much so that the Republic landed heavy tanks and the Jedi sent Council members Plo Koon and Ki-Adi-Mundi, alongside that of Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker and some of his other allies. Despite his mother still dying, the fact that the Jedi took an interest in the Outer and Mid-Rim meant a lot to him. He had a little bit of resentment, but he was able to get past it because the Jedi were actively doing right by the people like they should have been the entire time he was with them. While Palpatine continued to designate these protesters as rebels, the people became more agitated. They started with throwing rocks at clone troopers, which the Jedi stopped. The people appreciated the Jedi, but in a moment of collective anger, their attempts to stop the conflict weren't going as well as one would hope. Then, one of the clone officers, who was walking around without a helmet, was domed in the head with a rock. The troopers raised their weapons at the crowd and the people panicked. Plo and Mundi got between them and demanded that they stand down, and they didn't. The clones were ordered to arrest the agitators, and so they did. The Jedi were charged by the clones, which were ordered to not resist. However, the citizens had different ideas. One of these citizens was a young man, one who had a great disdain for this republic, and so Saul lobbed a droid popper into clone lines. It shocked a number of men, and the clones retaliated. They'd been stationed on this planet for weeks, and they were sick and tired of being treated like animals. The first blaster shot went off, and then the massacre began. No one knew what was happening. The Jedi tried to break free from their restraints as Plo and Mundi tried to take control of the situation. They broke free and ignited their weapons to stop the clones. But this was seen as a rallying cry for the people. They got antsy, and more droid poppers were thrown into clone lines, before the first actual explosion sounded off. Saw Gerrera and a group of his rebels prepared for this, and they fought fire with fire. Civilians were dropping, clones were dropping, and then the protesters fired back, which enforced the clone officer to tell the heavy tanks to open fire. And they did. The shot that would change the course of history. An ATTE shell launched from its barrel and smashed into the Jedi, clones, and protesters. The explosion killed one of the council members while sending the other one into the crowd of people. The clones were thrown from their feet, and an all-out brawl began. In the scuffle, no one could tell which Jedi had been killed, but Anakin didn't take too kindly to this action made by the clones, and he would join the protesters. These people would drive the clones from the square, and the Jedi would learn that Master Plo Koon was the one killed in the blast. In a moment where he was trying to quell protester and trooper, he was left in a vulnerable position, one where he would have never seen the shell coming. Ki-Adi-Mundi regretfully informed the Council of this loss, and he sent Anakin back to the temple on Jedha to speak with the Council in person about everything that transpired. He could sense how conflicted the event made Anakin, and believed it'd be best to keep him away from here. On Coruscant, Palpatine marked the event as the beginning of the end of all public demonstrations against the Republic. Padme was one of the many Senate members appalled by this, but her voice was overshadowed by the collective chants of unity against this scourge from the Mid and Outer Rim. 4 years before the Andon incident, the entire scenario around the removal from Coruscant had Anakin initially up in arms, but for him, it was the best thing that could have ever happened. He found more unity with his fellow Jedi, especially other Jedi his own age. The loss of his mother did affect him, but with friends around him, he recovered well. Anakin was promoted to the rank of Knight after he and a bundle of other Knights dismantled a terrorist plot to attack a Republic embassy. He did have his grievances with both sides, but he started to lament his time of loyalty to the Republic and to Palpatine. As for his adoration of Padme, it wilted away. When he stopped thinking of Palpatine in a positive light, he stopped adoring Padme. He believed she was one of the better politicians, but when he saw that the senator from Naboo motioned for the creation of a Republic military, he resented her. Little did he know that it was Jar Jar's doing, not her own. After the Andon massacre, the Jedi and Anakin were entirely against the Republic. They saw the state as a corrupt government, one with little regard for its citizens. The Council spoke to Dooku about this, and he expressed to his friends, as he called them, that he would handle this with diligence. He then asked them if the Republic were to attack, would they support him? And they all said that the Order would fully back the CIS if it came to it. The Republic was becoming too corrupt for them to stand for him, and with their word, he informed his master. The Clone Wars were set to begin. The war itself began with the Republic martial law, one that pushed the citizens to be even more rebellious. Once the clones enforced the new rule of the Republic, war came. The Jedi offered an incentive to end the series of laws that restricted civilian rights, but the Republic shunned them. They called the Jedi martyrs for a dead cause and dismissed them like disobedient children. Clones were ordered to fire on Jedi and citizens that disobeyed this martial law, and so naturally, the CIS rose from the tragic state of the galaxy to stand up for citizens. Mace Windu went with the first detachment of droids to the first location, Christophsis, where the war began. It was Republic territory in the Mid-Rim, and the Jedi were trying to release the government's grip over its people. When the clones didn't stand down, a battle began. The clones would fire against the droids, which were extremely ineffective. However, with the Jedi leading the assault, he was able to collaborate with a tactical droid and General Losum. The assault started slowly, but the CIS outnumbered the clones, and very quickly, after the first detachment of B-1s were dealt with, Mace Windu led the B-2s on a rampage of Republic lines. He didn't want to kill the clones, but they were serving a corrupt form of government, and they weren't giving him any other options. If it was reversed, this would have been a lot easier, because droids weren't living beings. Windu did make sure that any clone that did surrender was taken away into custody and treated fairly. The siege at Christophsis launched the Clone Wars into action. Mace and his division continued fronting an assault against the clones. Windu was able to evacuate the citizens and get them to safety. Due to the overwhelming numbers he possessed, he was able to make sure everyone was safe for the assault to continue. Initially, the Jedi rejected the idea of war, but to serve alongside the CIS forces so that they could liberate the galaxy from the Republic, that was a gift. It helped them find their original core values, aside from the actual waging of a war. Other council members, and eventually knights and masters, joined the front lines. Mace would have himself the first victory at Christophsis, and his victory would include the capture of a couple thousand clones. Dooku saw this alliance with the Jedi as a potential way out of his bind with Sidious. He at this point was wise enough to assume that Palpatine had a backup plan for everything. He also figured that his instructor would turn on him. Skywalker may have not been with the Republic anymore, but he could be swayed. Palpatine was already trying to find a way to capture Anakin and have him brought to Coruscant, where he could be convinced to join the Sith. That was difficult though. Due to the vast size of the CIS military, there was no telling where Skywalker would be, but Dooku didn't want Sidious's prized student anywhere near Palpatine's grasp. Dooku paired Skywalker and Grievous up together, and they manned a super ship called the Malevolence. The two leaders, Grievous as general and Skywalker's commander, were able to prepare the perfect fleet to keep Republic bombers away. Also, with Anakin on the vessel, no clone pilot would be able to get by him. There was also one key reason that Grievous didn't hate the Jedi. Seeing as the Republic and Jedi operated on separate frequencies, he saw the Jedi's ineffectiveness as a direct tie to the Republic, rather than their original mandate, so he was able to forgive them for their negligence in the past. This didn't mean he was thrilled about being paired up with Skywalker. Ironically, it was due to Anakin that he grew to appreciate the Jedi. While Anakin wasn't the common Jedi, Grievous didn't know that, so he assumed they were all kinda similar to him in one way or another. Anakin and Grievous therefore would work together to dismantle Republic fleets that were unlucky enough to come across them. Truthfully, from Palpatine's perspective, the war didn't look like an absolute win, even with him controlling the behind-the-scenes work. He therefore came up with an alternative plan, conscripting millions of Republic citizens into Republic trooper positions. These people were drafted, so they had no rights about denying or accepting their enlistment. Surprisingly, this was not met with hostility. For families unaffected by this, which was more of them than not, they believed it was right to fight for the Republic. Palpatine's government was able to keep up its popularity because all they were doing was putting away noisy populations and attempting to keep the peace. This was clearly a result of propaganda to support the Republic war machine. Without the Jedi on his side, it was an entirely different ballgame when it came to fighting off the Separatists. The war itself was grueling. Jedi were superior warriors, and with unlimited troops at their disposal, they were literally an unstoppable force. They used their numbers to their advantage, and the Republic very early on was caught flat-footed. The CIS saw the Jedi as the heroes of their war effort, while the Republic saw them as villains in a treasonous war against a ruling state in the galaxy. On the front lines, Jedi Masters, Knights, and Padawans were responsible for the deaths of thousands of clones. With commando units serving inside the military, the Jedi were enlisted early on to join a group of commandos on an attack at the Rishi outpost. One of the Jedi found an adoration for the execution of these lifeless beings. Pong Krell would join the commandos on their attack, wiping out the Domino Squad in one fell swoop. Truthfully, despite trying to look like they were winning the war, The Separatists weren't supposed to be this successful. The issue is, the Jedi were just expert warriors. All of the planning done by the Sith could have never prepared for how effective the Jedi were in these battles with battle droids. Sidious was getting antsy too, and Dooku could sense it. There was something so relieving about how on edge his master was becoming. If he could get Sidious this uneasy, then perhaps there didn't need to be a longevity with the Sith. Especially because, as Dooku could tell, the dark side was tearing his own body apart from the inside out. He aged rapidly ever since joining Sidious. In 11 years, he went from barely a speck of gray to not a sight of black hair. His body ached too. Maybe it was time he reconsidered how close he was to Palpatine. His only issue was what Palpatine had in his plans to stop him from successfully running a rebellion. Regardless, due to the Jedi and Grievous not following the script, the Malevolence and a massive Separatist support fleet surprised the Republic outside of Kamino after the Rishi Moon was captured. Despite the Republic having a fleet present, they had nothing ready to defend themselves, and they were caught in a bind. Pong Krell's commando mission was a success, and the Jedi were prepared to cut the Republic off from a true victory. The clones moved to defend their home planet, but the Malevolence had ample time to prepare 3 energy bursts. The Separatist fleet took up positions above and below the super ship to provide covering fire. When the EMP fired, it hit 3 targets, each covering full flanks of the Republic lines, left, middle, and right. With the majority of the Republic defenseless, Skywalker led a fighter assault with hyenas, vultures, and tri-fighters, and he was unstoppable. Behind him came the rest of the Separatist support fleet, with the tactical droid unleashing firepower on defenseless Venators. From behind the fleet, C-9979 Trade Federation landing crafts pulled through the increasing rubble of Republic defenses. Inside the landing craft were Obi-Wan Kenobi and Asajj Ventress. The two of them were working hand in hand with each other. The Jedi had a vague understanding of what Dooku was, but they never believed him to be a Sith. The same was seen for Asajj. They didn't think she was a Sith either, because there had been numerous individuals who used the full spectrum of the Force with red lightsabers that were not Sith. This was applied to them, because the Sith would never have been so righteous in the pursuit of the greater good. Regardless, Kenobi and Ventress were standing side by side, waiting for the dropships to release them. The two of them were paired up for the longer part of the first few months of this war, and they thrived being around each other, close in age and a storm of tension like no other. Kenobi just reminded her that they were here to capture the facility, not execute anyone. She flirtatiously responded, not promising anything. When the bay doors opened, battle droids marched out at double speed. B2 stood above them on the ramps, unloading wrist rockets, and then the Jedi and Night Sister charged into the fray. Across the battlefield, the clones fought with all their might to defend Kamino, but there was nothing they could realistically do. Grievous in space finished off the rest of the support fleet. The few corvettes that survived escaped to the surface to take out the droid drop ships, but they were followed by Separatist frigates, and they wouldn't survive much longer after that. Due to the importance of Kamino, another 2 fleets dropped out of hyperspace. Luckily, Grievous and his super weapon were prepared. Even though he fired 3 rounds, the entire EMP weapon charged up 3 times, so the other side of the weapon, which was on the port side, hadn't been activated. Grievous also never deactivated the weapon because the victory wasn't confirmed yet. This fleet wasn't here because of the battle. They were here because the Rishi station had gone quiet on communications, and a scout team never reported back after investigating. Because the Malevolence was such a big ship, it was at the back of the Separatist flank, and it allowed the droid general to roll the beast around to the port side and unleash the EMP weapons without affecting its allies. There were a couple wings of fighters that began trench runs on the ship that were able to avoid the EMP bursts, but they were intercepted by Skywalker, who came to his friend's aid. Despite the rest of the fleet being out of position, the Malevolence was able to open up its heavy cannons. The ship moved forward through the rubble of the former defense fleet and began ripping through the Republic attack force. It was truly a shame. Many of these vessels had their hangar bay doors locked open, and some mechanics were able to get the gunships powered up and leave the hangar bay with troops ready to aid their brothers on the ground. However, Skywalker and his droid fighters had differing opinions on this. Tri-fighters released waves of torpedoes and destroyed the clones' hope of ever returning home. On the ground, Kenobi and Ventress cut through those who weren't willing to surrender. With a group of Magna Guards following behind them, they were an elite unit, but there were no hope for the clones or the Kaminoans. They fought with bravery, all of them fighting to the bitter end. but B-2 units, which fill the majority of the ranks, ripped through the clone forces. The two Force users were assigned with taking the clone trooper genome, and they very easily accomplished it, after cutting down a number of ARC troopers. Victory followed shortly after. The loss at Kamino would completely demoralize the clone army. Republic troopers couldn't care less, but the clones were heartbroken. The Separatists released information on the loss at Kamino, reporting 2 completely destroyed fleets, the thousands of dead and captured clones, as well as the fall of Kamino. The Republic was in a desperate need for a victory, and yet they could not find it. Didn't matter how many forces they threw at the front lines, they could not stop the Separatist war machine. Palpatine, after the Battle of Kamino, contacted his apprentice and demanded to know what he was doing. Dooku responded, informing his master that he was following the plan. Palpatine reached out his hand and choked Dooku from a galaxy away, lifting him off the ground and demanding that he slow down his military movements. Dooku's legs hung suspended in the air as he tried to reason with his master. Sidious threw Dooku to the ground and told him that the plan needed more time, and he jeopardized everything by winning at Kamino. Dooku tried to remind Palpatine that Kamino was in their plans, but it was silenced. The CIS was never supposed to win that battle. Dooku tried to make any excuse, and Sidious raised his hand again and asked if he was feeling sympathetic to his former master and the wretched Jedi Order. Dooku shook his head, pleading that things were different now. Sidious threw Dooku against the window, cracking the priceless glass across the sides, and Sidious told his apprentice to make right of his failure to listen. The communication ended and Dooku dropped to the ground, coughing up blood. He knew Palpatine listened to all transmissions, always in question of his loyalty. A sense of paranoia began rising. He couldn't tell the Jedi. It didn't matter what he did. Even if Order 33 was made specifically for the Jedi, Order 99 could turn the droids into hostile creatures. He was talented, but not even Dooku could stop them if they all became violent. He didn't know what he could do to avoid being destroyed by the Sith Lord. Sidious was everywhere, and his true influence was unknown. Dooku knew a straight fight from across the galaxy would be catastrophic for him, so he needed to play his cards right. Sidious always questioned loyalty, so he would make sure Sidious paid the price. The Jedi had their own little dilemma too, one that started ever since the first battle at Christophsis. They fought with the clones and they did feel that certain burden about killing them. But this was a war, how could they not? The Council spoke on this a number of times across their locations, because if they were fighting droids then it wouldn't be an issue. These were living beings, and they were being actually killed. It obviously wasn't the first time the Jedi killed sentients in a war, but still, the moral dilemma needed to be questioned, just in order to maintain their legitimacy as an order. The Council did come to the conclusion that if Dooku ever chose to be more aggressive in the pursuit of war, then they would opt out of the war itself. At this point, the Separatists were legitimately freeing the people of the galaxy. This brought Senators Amidala, Farr, Organa, Mothma, Chuchi, and more over to the side of the CIS, meaning that some prominent Republic worlds were supporting a movement that didn't stand with the Republic. This meant that for a couple of these senators, they'd be removed from their roles within the Republic. The entire system began collapsing on itself, and the CIS pushed forward with a heavier war front. Due to Padme and her allies leaving the Senate, the Republic became more war-oriented, and they pushed back. The Jedi throughout this time continued to push for peace options, and for Anakin, he found a great relief in Padme's decision to return to the side of the righteous. It gave him even more of a boost to help end the war and destroy the Republic. Sidious monitored all war movements and could see the CIS slow down its push, but commando missions, which were not reported widely to high command, didn't make it to Sidious's hands, so he was unaware that Jedi like Pong Krell, Ima Gun-Di, Agan Kolar, and a number of other elite Jedi were taking down Republic facilities behind the scenes. These commando missions were crippling the Republic war effort, and despite Dooku playing blind to these, he knew the day would come when Order 33 was executed. So, in a defining moment, in his time since leaving the Order, he requested Yoda to Sereno, where he revealed the truth about everything to his old friend, telling him that either way, the Jedi weren't meant to win this war, and the day was coming when Sidious would implement Order 33. Dooku suggested that his former master remove all Jedi from the front lines and hide in different locations around the galaxy, unidentified ones that the Jedi were not currently using. Yoda did have one question, which was why Dooku waited until now, or why he even said anything to begin with. He told his former master that he felt that the Jedi, despite all their flaws, were on the right side of history. They no longer served complacency, they stood for their ideals, and they strived for the betterment of the galaxy. He initially joined the Sith for such ideals, but they were hollow promises from a man who was willing to sacrifice billions, if not trillions, so he could have all the power in the galaxy. Yoda felt both shame and pride during this moment. Shame that he made his final student feel so hopeless in the Jedi, but pride that at the end of all of it, after spending 11 years as a Sith, he still found goodness within himself. Dooku hadn't committed atrocities like he would have if the Jedi didn't join his side, and now the ruse was up. The Order had 24 hours to remove all personnel from the front lines. This included Grievous, Ventress, and a number of other sentient Separatist leaders. Skywalker, Grievous, Ventress, and Kenobi, which were the most elite unit in the CIS military, were quick to rally together and remove themselves. Dooku's warning didn't fall on deaf ears, and he quickly informed the government of these developments. They reacted diligently by putting measures into place to secure the Separatist movement if they were killed. Palpatine could feel the change in the wind of the Force, and quickly issued out Executive Order 33, one that had droids turning into monsters. But this didn't just apply to attempting to kill Jedi, it applied to citizens, and luckily for Dooku, he saved the recording of Palpatine's voice and a hologram of him sending out the order. Dooku also influenced the Force to create a Force projection of himself so that he could be reported as killed in the Order, a move that would change the galaxy forever. Palpatine believed he won the war. All he needed to do was control the droids into losing it. Order 33 sent battle droids into execute mode, which had them leveling cities and executing prisoners, even clones. The people of the galaxy would watch civilizations crumble as the droids went from docile and relatively friendly to vile. People didn't understand why this was happening, and then a communication rang out from across the galaxy. Dooku survived, and he informed the people that Palpatine was behind the war. He designed code words into both the clones and droids to wipe out the Jedi and/or any opposing threat in the galaxy. Dooku covered his tracks quickly by informing the people that he didn't know about it until the Jedi revealed hidden codes on Kamino, and he confirmed his suspicions when a message from Coruscant was intercepted, one showing Palpatine's face and depicting his voice. Dooku believed the entire war was orchestrated by Palpatine to achieve more power in the Republic. He desperately called for the galaxy to act on him, before he turned the clones against the Republic too. Dooku ended his dire transmission, and he voided every droid with Order 33 and gave them Order 404, which was a basic shut down and reset order. Essentially, it would put the droids back into their original factory settings. Palpatine did as Dooku said he would, and he enlisted the clones into his executive orders, forcing them to act as he wished them to. He gave them orders to wipe out the Senate, and enforced not just martial law but a more dangerous version of it, one that had any citizen and/or Republic trooper not obeying his command suspected of treason and to be executed on sight. Republic troopers saw this as an unbridled attack on their rights as citizens, and so, as the clones cracked down, Republic troopers fought back. The galaxy would watch in horror as the Republic would destroy its own identity. With the CIS droids now free from Order 33, Dooku brought his main battle force back to the forefront of the galaxy, sending Grievous, Skywalker, Ventress, and Kenobi to Coruscant. There would be a supporting fleet to assist him in this fight, but there would be no fight, aside from the space battle, one that wouldn't even be a legitimate contest. With the Malevolence, it was just a rout, and the war on the ground wasn't even fought between droids and clones, rather clones and citizen warriors. Palpatine stood inside the Senate chambers, and Skywalker was giving clearance from Dooku to execute him. Hyenas and Tri-Fighters forced their way into the city and bombed the Chancellor's office, and to ensure he was dead, his various locations around the city were targeted and destroyed. None of these bombings incurring a singular citizen death. Once the smoke settled, and the brainwashed clones retreated into the ramparts of the battlefield, Dooku sent a message galaxy-wide, informing the people that his only wishes were to dismantle the corrupt system of the Republic and bring freedom to the galaxy. He would understand if they saw him as a villain of the story, but at the end of it, if he died as a villain to restore a system for the people of the galaxy, then he would do that with all of his heart. In his mind, something that wasn't audibly said, is that it was a better fate than dying a Sith. The people of the galaxy wouldn't even know how to comprehend this. The clones were still affected by the multitude of executive orders left behind by Palpatine, but thanks to the CIS, they were able to stun the clones and repair their minds by removing the inhibitor chips, which their information was found on Kamino, totally not by Dooku. The rebuilding process would be very challenging, but thanks to the Jedi, it'd become a lot easier. However, the Jedi made a point to make things easier not just for the core, but the mid and outer rim. They wanted to make sure that if the core saw support, then the forgotten locations in the galaxy actually received their aid instead of it being funded back into politicians' pockets. And it was this right here that Dooku was finally able to see the positive outcome that came from the war. The Jedi were servants of the people. They were representing who they were meant to represent, not a government, but the people themselves. With the war concluding with a bittersweet finale, the Republic troopers would realize their enlistment was for nothing. Their losses were for nothing, and therefore they were disregarded by their fellow citizens. But the CIS, thanks to the combined efforts of Dooku, Mina Bontiri, and Padme Amidala, would be able to make sure these troopers, including the clones, would be compensated. Even though they fought against the CIS, the government believed it was fair, considering Palpatine forced them into something they had no legitimate control over. Padme and Anakin wouldn't ever begin a real relationship, but they would rekindle a couple of times after things calmed down. Dooku's truth would be shared with Yoda amongst the council members, but they would see his deception as a gift to their cause. Without the lies, they would have never found completion. Anakin's friendship with Grievous would continue, the two of them becoming legendary warriors of their era. Skywalker would become a Jedi Master after training his own student. Inversely, Obi-Wan and Ventress would keep a low-key relationship with each other, never showing it off to anyone or being boisterous about it. They'd never have any kids, but it would be a real relationship, just a secretive one. The CIS military would be used for an assortment of projects, namely tearing down former Sith temples and burning every relic, so that their religion could go extinct. Also, conquering criminal syndicates and destroying them, as well as rebuilding locations affected by the executive orders used at the end of the war. The Clone Wars were short-lived, but its effect would see the corrupt state of the Republic reduced to ash, and the rise of a new regime, one that, like the Jedi, truly cared about the people of the galaxy. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to all of our patrons: Benjamin Wells, Django Fett Clone, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pure Mark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tibbs, CC2024, Galava Gaming, Tristan, Mandalore, Sir Willem 1767, Darth Revan, Grandy Bane, Laliant, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo Weewu67, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Nox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tam, Johnny DeGuin, Sansa Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Callie, Youngly Slayer 66, Madman Studios, Anakin 003, Lord Draken, Fortis Legacy Star Wars, Erebus, Rex the Wolf, the main three first names, Darkseid46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing. For supporting the channel, smash that like button, support me in other ways, go check out the things. Special thanks to N-Sabers for sponsoring our 125,000 subscriber lightsaber giveaway. If you want to find out how you can win one of 6 lightsabers, check the pinned comment down below. Otherwise, let's talk about this story. So, this was fun. It was a lot of fun doing this political game with Dooku, the Jedi, and Sidious. But having the Jedi on the CIS side was something I was thinking about for a while. I had the thumbnail on this idea in the comments for a while, and I was like, how do I want to do this? And I think this is like the way it had to be done. It is surprisingly positive and almost wholesome, with Grievous and Anakin having a friendship, and Obi-Wan and Ventress having a friendship, and Dooku finally coming around. He's not the same Dooku we see in canon. In canon, he's a lot more evil. He does a lot more atrocities that we just kind of ignore because he's conflicted in a way. But this story, he actually doesn't do those atrocities. He's actually a decent person, despite being quote-unquote Sith, until, he turns on Palpatine. But I wanted Palpatine to feel like he had all of his cards in the right play, and that Order 33 would be supported by Dooku and would result in Dooku's death, and then at the end, it wouldn't. So, I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.